serving all North Texas. Fox 4 News.
Good evening, I'm Richard Ray. Funeral arrangements have now been finalized for former President George H.W.Bush, who died last night in Houston. In the next few hours, his body will be flown to Washington on Air Force One. He will lie in state in the Capitol Rotunda from Monday through Wednesday, followed by a service at Washington National Cathedral. He'll be laid to rest Thursday back here in Texas on the grounds of his presidential library at Texas A&M. Let's take a look at College Station tonight, where many students gathered for a candlelight vigil. Expressions of sadness and condolences continue to pour in from around the world. For some of us here at Fox 4, the loss feels personal.
Channel 4's Richard Ray is following George Bush and joins us now from Des Moines. Rich?
The year was 1988, and I was assigned to cover George H.W. Bush as he ran for president. On this day, a tough question had to be asked about a magazine cover that had essentially labeled him a wimp. As always, his answer was firm but gracious.
My reaction is I've been under the brightest microscope of them all, being Vice President of the United States for 7 years, and it is a difference. It was far different than when I was a congressman or being confirmed for CIA. And so some of these candidates are going to have to realize that this is the big league.
It was a bruising campaign that, in the end, Mr. Bush won.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
George H.W. Bush was born in Milton, Massachusetts in 1924, son of Prescott Bush, Wall Street banker and later U.S. Senator. When World War II broke out, Bush became the youngest Navy aviator. He was shot down by the Japanese in the Pacific, and remarkably, his rescue was captured on film. When the war ended, he married his wife Barbara, college at Yale, then on to Texas for a career in the oil industry. He was elected to Congress from Houston. 2 Senate runs failed, but in the 1970s, he was appointed ambassador to the United Nations and director of the CIA. In 1980, he lost the Republican nomination to Ronald Reagan, but joined the ticket as vice president. 8 years later, following Reagan into the White House, where he would preside over the end of the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall. He united a coalition of 33 nations that routed Saddam Hussein's troops out of Kuwait in the first Gulf War. In the flush of victory, it seemed that Bush would cruise to a second term, and he might have, but for 6 words.
Read my lips.
The deal Bush cut with Congress to raise taxes would lead down the road to a balanced budget and a booming economy. But as Election Day approached, the economy was faltering, and Bill Clinton would win the race. George H.W. Bush returned to Houston with his beloved wife Barbara, continuing to lead a remarkably robust life even after his body began to fail him.
But he was such a regular fellow.
Fox 4's Sean Rabb remembers being invited with other reporters and photographers to George and Barbara's home as their oldest son, George W., ran for president.
They treated me as if they'd known me forever. And it was hard to imagine this is the same man who had been the president, the head of the CIA. He made me feel comfortable. He made me feel very, very welcome. I felt very welcome in his home. It was a great experience. I've shared it countless times.
One of the first times I met him, it's actually a funny story, he was going to skydive for his 75th birthday.
Fox 4's Rick Smith was there for the first of the birthday skydives, the last on President Bush's 90th.
They had a really hard landing, and we were all like, and we waited, and everybody went over to tend to him, and he just kind of came up and he had this big smile from ear to ear, and we were all just laughing because we just knew that this is what he wanted to do.
Congratulations and happy birthday, Mr. President.
The 41st president's oldest son would become our nation's 43rd president. And in 2013 opened his own presidential library at SMU, bringing together 5 presidents.
Dad taught me how to be a president. Before that, he showed me how to be a man. In 41, it is awesome that you are here today.
And thank you all for coming, and to all those who made this marvelous museum possible, we thank you especially, and we're glad to be here. God bless America, and thank you very much.
President Bush died surrounded by friends and family. Near the end, Friday night, his son, George W., was put on a speakerphone to tell him that he'd been a wonderful dad, that he loved him. "I love you too," Mr. Bush told his son. His last words. George H.W. Bush put stock in a kinder and gentler America, able to put aside partisan differences and reach across the aisle for the benefit of the country. The kind of politician we don't see much anymore. People in North Texas are paying their respects at the George W. Bush Presidential Center. Fox 4's Ashley Paredes has more on what's being done there.